Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Abe Casbo. I'm CEO of Verasoni, a marketing consultancy, agency, and advisory. The winter edition of Incisal Edge featured the results of the 2024 dental survey. And with me to discuss the results are Chuck Cohen, CEO of Benco, and Tim Twigg, CEO of Bent Ericksen Associates. Gentlemen, welcome, and let's get right to it.
Thank
Chuck,
you.
can you give us a little background about why for the why for the 2024 dental survey? Like, why did you do it? And specifically, why was it important to partner with somebody like Tim and Ben Erickson Associates?
So, two parts to that, two answers to that question. The first one is the number one issue when we talk to our dentist customers is all around HR. People, finding people, retaining people, getting the right people in the right spots on the bus. So the number one, the intersection of all the challenges almost every dental office faces these days are people. You get the right people, they're in the right slots, you keep them for a long time, keep them well trained, your practice runs like a finely well-oiled machine. But anything that drags from that also causes challenges. Why we work with Bent Ericksen, very easy. In the dental world, the number one expert consulting company on HR issues in dentistry is Bent Ericksen.
Wow. Well, Tim, well, that was quite an endorsement from Chuck. But Tim, what are you seeing in the marketplace right now? Before we get into a little bit of the stats from the results from the survey.
Well, one of the pieces, and thank you, Chuck, for your kind words and your support. One of the things that we were looking for relative to the survey was this idea of getting away from the hype and the scary stuff. And there's so much that also gets published and talked about. Seems like the emphasis is on corporate dentistry and private equity and DSOs. And the reality is, the independent dental practice still represents the majority of all the practices. And so this was a way also of almost like giving the independent dental practices a voice and then also really honing in on what their particular struggles and issues were. So that among the reasons were why we were really excited about being part of this.
Uh, One of the questions was how challenging is it for your practice to find qualified candidates for employment? Obviously, if you can't find qualified candidates for employment, you literally can't run a dental practice. And over 70% said that that's a problem. And over 70% said it's very difficult to find qualified candidates. Why is that? What's happening in the marketplace? And Chuck and Tim, please.
So I'll go first. Definitely think we have a supply issue. We don't have enough qualified candidates. We're just not making enough hygienists and not making enough EFTAs or expanded function dental assistants. And when we don't have enough, it just means that, basic supply and demand, the price of each one goes up. Moreover, when we don't have enough, it means that our practices don't run well and we can't seat the patients that we have. One piece of advice that we're giving our clients is whatever you used to spend on marketing, redirect that spend and that effort towards finding and attracting the right people. If a dental practice can seat the patients, can get the patients treated, they will do well. They don't need a marketing plan.
Chuck, I could tell you that as a CEO of a marketing company that works with dental practices, we're literally saying the same thing to our clients because there's no use to doing any marketing if you can't deliver dentistry.
And you asked before why we work with Bent Ericksen. The reason we work with Bent Ericksen on the survey is because finding the right candidates in a supply constricted environment requires the right strategies. And that's really where Tim and his team come in because they understand how to find, attract, and retain the right people for the practice.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think a key piece that Chuck, you just said, is this piece about retention, because I couldn't agree with you more that there is a supply and demand problem or issue. And everything we are seeing from the ADA, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, this supply challenge or issue is not going to go away anytime soon. The numbers of hygienists who are saying they're retiring. A third of hygienists are saying they're retiring in the next 3 to 5 years. And so then it's like, okay, well, why are they retiring? And among those reasons, it's the work environment. It's just not a culture that is very supportive. And so, yeah, to your point, we look at this is a reframe of being an employer and this idea of what do I need to do to have the reputation in my town or in my community as a great place to work? And that's not just about money. That's all about the culture and providing people with a sense of belonging, etc.
You know, one of the questions here is how has your staff overhead percentage changed in the last 2 years? And is it higher? Is it no change? Is it lower? A significant amount of respondents said it's much higher, and I think it speaks to a little bit of what you guys are just talking about. Um, so, Chuck, take the money from marketing, put it into people. Can talk a little bit more about that? Like, I know we touched on it, but talk a little bit more about that.
The bad news is that the people costs of a dental practice are going up, and I don't know that there's anybody who can do anything about that in the short term, just because we have a supply issue. The good news is there are things that dental practices can do to improve the productivity of the people they already have. Part of that is on Tim's side, which is just having happier, more enthusiastic people. Part of it is on the Benco side, investing in technology, changing systems around, just having more patient throughput for every employee you have. The bad news is hard to control salaries and make them go down. The good news is you can improve productivity so you can get more out of every dollar you're spending on people.
So, Tim,
Yeah,
how do you deal with that internally, right? When you have let's say you have a hygienist, you don't want to lose her or him, and they come to you, and but you know, the pie is only so big. What is that discussion like for a dental practice, and why should that dental practice work to keep that hygienist?
well, two things. The cost of turnover statistically costs however much you pay for that position for a year. And so even if you gave someone the equivalent of $1 or $2 more an hour, that's nothing compared to the financial and the emotional toll and impact of having turnover. Now, the other piece, when we talk about overhead, that there's like this for me, that there's this good news, bad news element. Yeah, kind of the bad news element is the costs, the employee costs and overhead are now higher. The thing that most dentists did not and do not realize is for the preceding 7 to 10 years, the dental industry was actually in a stagflation mode where wages weren't even keeping up. And so, to some degree, you could say, oh, well, I kind of won for 7 to 10 years, and now it's just sort of catching up. It's not like totally chicken little and the sky is falling kind of thing. I love the idea of the shift of marketing dollars to say, okay, now these are going to be people dollars. And to Chuck's point about productivity, there are elements there that just even have to do with basic communication skills to be able to have the kinds of conversations with patients that allow for treatment acceptance to be higher. And specifically, if treatment acceptance is higher, on a per appointment basis, now to Chuck's point, I'm more productive in the same amount of time.
And let me offer one other example to what Tim just said. I agree 100% with Tim, and I would add, how many practices out there still have hygienists whose wages are going up running the sterilization area? How many practices out there have old autoclaves that go too slowly? How many practices out there cannot turn the instruments and cannot turn the rooms over fast enough? Where adding another room, adding capacity, even what we're seeing more and more is a hygiene assistant, two hygienists with a hygiene assistant, that improves productivity dramatically. So a lot of times in a dental practice, we're using old productivity, skills, old productivity systems and equipment, but it's a new environment where we're paying all of our people more money. So really think about how can you improve the patient throughput of the practice in terms, so you can achieve better productivity with the same number of people. It's out there, and oftentimes it just takes a little bit of creativity and maybe some modest investment.
So I think you guys just killed my next question, which was, why is HR alignment so vital for dental practices? So I think we got that. But Tim, what are some specific ways that dental practices can improve their HR situation? Whether they're recruiting, whether they're, aligning the team. Can you talk about that, please?
Sure. I think new playbook, just in light of a whole bunch of the issues that we just talked about. So, first and foremost, when hiring, you hire for attitude. That basically means you are hiring for something that you cannot train. See, the focus for hiring has always been on experience and, how many years of this and so on. It's like, first and foremost, you hire for attitude. Secondly, if we now have a person that we think we're going to enjoy just hanging around with and working with, then we go to the aptitude part, which is to look at, can they do the job? The reality also is if we really like this person and the attitude's wonderful, we can train people to do virtually. We can train people to run the computer. We can train them to run the autoclave. We can train them to process insurance. We can train people to take x-rays. So we can train all those things. We can't train attitude. Now, there's a lot of talk about team and team development and team building. But if you are a practice that is experiencing turnover on some regular ongoing basis, it's just a losing proposition to be investing in team building or team development, because that's one step forward and two steps back. It just doesn't make any sense. So first and foremost, this idea of recruiting and finding people is first about attitude, then about aptitude. Can they do the job? And then we start plugging them into a culture that allows them to have a space and place to thrive. And we all start to enjoy. Well, then the whole team development thing on some level kind of happens it just happens. We don't have to do a whole bunch of crazy stuff, but it starts with having the right people on the bus. And then we got to have these right people in the right seats on the bus, given aptitude and personality and so on. And then you get to really thrive.
And I would add to what Tim said. I love everything, 100% agree again, as usual, which is why we do this podcast together. I take it one step farther and I would say, and there are some things that are not immediately obvious that enter into your employees' decisions to stay or to go or to join or to leave. Things like, how are the doctor's clinical skills? Really good people want to work for doctors who have good clinical skills. How's the patient care? How's the customer satisfaction? How's the condition of the office? The main difference, I think, here is that today, 2025, as we record this, our employees have more options than ever before. A generation ago, maybe that wasn't so true. There were only a few dental practices in town, and maybe you had the best one because you had equipment that was 5 years old, or you had carpet that had been replaced a generation ago, but you were better than everybody else. Today, people are more portable than ever, and as such, really good people want to stay and work in an office that provides great patient outcomes, high level of customer satisfaction, and an environment that makes me want to come to work every day.
And continuity of staff is a branding issue. It is a marketing issue, right? You show up, the same people are there. You've got a relationship with them as a patient. Well, there's a lot of value to that, and that's branding. Your branding isn't, what your website says or what your logo looks like. It's how people feel about you and how you make people feel about you in your practice. Chuck, I got one last question for you before we go. When it's all said and done, what's the best advice you have for practices today as it relates to the people side or the HR side of dental practices?
Yeah. The number one piece of advice I would say is don't whine about paying people more money. figure out how to get the people you have at higher salaries to be more productive.
Well, I want to thank you guys for joining us and for summing up the 2024 HR Dental Survey. I think we provided a lot of color. And for everybody who was watching, thank you for watching. And the link to the survey is going to be in the description here. Have a great evening, everybody.